they're continuing to win over Hispanic and minority voters across the US. The sort of old racial blocs, the cliches about American elections seem to be cracking, and the coalitions are shifting somewhat.
Have Donald Trump's hopes of making a presidential comeback been dashed by the US midterm elections? This is a question that we at the Center for Risk Analysis considered in a recent client webinar to discuss the US midterms. If you enjoy this analysis, you might want to become a subscriber to the CRA services. There's a link in the description below where you can find out more information. Enjoy.
Yes, just zeroing in a bit, Nick, on the Republican Party itself and looking at the results and maybe projecting forward. I mean, the main story that stands out is the incredible performance by Governor Ron DeSantis in Florida, where he pretty much waxed his opponent. He delivered 3 seats with an aggressive gerrymander in his seat, while on average, Trump-backed nominees were running behind generic Republicans all around, how some people would call them, rhinos and that sort of thing. So do you think maybe the kingmaker role, the main man role that Trump has played in the party is maybe really affected the party's performance negatively, and that will be shifted? Or do you think regardless, Trump will still be the candidate in the next elections?
So I think the Republican Party is destined for an internal civil war at this point. Donald Trump has spent ever since 2016, he actually was not that powerful within the Republican Party in 2016. A lot of people in the party expected him to lose that election and were sort of just going along with him. He won, I think, only 40% of the primary vote, but because of the Republican winner-take-all system, he managed to secure the nomination in 2016. However, ever since he became president, and actually in a lot of ways, since after he left the presidency, he's focused a lot of his energy on securing control of the Republican Party. And not just the party, but also its the attached sort of conservative media, conservative think tank space, those parts of the US, which have, generally speaking, pretty solidly lined up behind him now. It's unusual for a defeated president in a presidential election to be so influential in a party that when he fails to win an election. But Trump has managed it. And he really threw his weight around quite a lot in this election. He encouraged a number of candidates to win, not to win, to run. For example, I think Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania to run for that contested seat, and Mehmet Oz has lost. And many people chalk that up to the fact that he was just not a great candidate. When the Republican primary in Pennsylvania was held, Mehmet Oz only won the Republican primary by, I think it was a few thousand votes, less than a percentage point. And that was almost entirely due to Donald Trump's endorsement, which pushed him over the top. And yet, despite the fact that his opponent, John Fetterman, suffered an incredibly debilitating stroke in May of this year and still refused to drop out of the race, Mehmet Oz was defeated, which suggests that he may, in fact, be one of the worst candidates ever put up in a deeply contested state in a US election. And it's kind of difficult to not see how Donald Trump was a decisive factor in getting the Republicans to choose Oz. Similarly, Herschel Walker in Georgia is, shall we say, a controversial figure. He's had a lot of personal scandals. He has a very messy home life. I think he's diagnosed with one of the bipolar diseases, which he's quite open about. He's previously, for example, threatened to kill his wife during a psychotic episode. So not the kind of guy you'd normally expect to win an election. Now, there's a lot of things, I'm talking him down. There's a lot of reasons why people do like him. He was a former football player. He has this good reputation as a community worker. He's a very devout religious guy. And he's made his story a lot about how he kind of turned his life around from the mess that it was in, and that he's a committed family man. That's the kind of image he's tried to project. But still, a controversial guy. Now, he may win the Georgia seat. It's going to be very close. His opponent, the Democrat Warnock, is currently ahead of him by, I think, 0.6% of the vote in the current counting. If that margin is less than 0.5%, there has got to be a recount. If neither candidate gets 50%, there has to be another election, a special election, which follows. That will happen later this year, and we're probably only actually going to know who controls that Georgia seat then. And the control of the whole Senate may come down to that. So it's going to be pretty intense, regardless of what happens. But these are people who Trump strongly backed. And if they lose, it's going to be very difficult to not say that he was at least partially responsible for this. Where in contrast, Ron DeSantis, who's considered perhaps the main challenger to Donald Trump for control of the Republican Party, as you said, absolutely blew it away in Florida. Florida has been one of the bright spots in this election for the Republicans. They have performed very well there. They're continuing to win over Hispanic and minority voters across the US. The sort of old racial blocs, the cliches about American elections seem to be cracking, and the coalitions are shifting somewhat. And it's going to be very difficult, I think, now for Donald Trump to decisively fend off Ron DeSantis. And you can already see that he's begun attacking Ron DeSantis, calling him Ron DeSanctimonious.
Ron DeSanctimonious.
And saying that he knows lots of bad things about him, and if he runs for president, he's going to let the world know about it. So I think the Republicans are in for a messy time there. But it wasn't just them who were kind of on the ballot tonight. Joe Biden has not proved a particularly popular president. His approval rating is pretty low. In fact, it's very comparable to Trump's. And he's also very old. He's had a lot of missteps recently, particularly where he doesn't seem like he's entirely focused on what he knows on what's going on in interviews, that kind of thing.
Well, if anybody think if we're doing it for the first time now in the 21st century, going into the 20th, from the 20th century going into the second quarter of the 21st century, that we'd say 12 years is enough?
So a very bad result for Democrats here tonight would certainly increase calls for Joe Biden to not run for a second term. So with the election going better than the Democrats hoped it would, they may kind of think to themselves, well, maybe we can run Joe Biden again. And maybe if he's against Donald Trump again, and we have a repeat of 2020, he can win again. But I think this is probably a bit of a trap for them. The main problem the Democrats have is that they don't have a clear successor to Joe Biden, and no one really wants to put their head above the parapet, particularly when he's done better than expected in the midterm, and challenge him. They're going to look like a traitor, and they're probably just going to sink their own party. But I'm skeptical as to whether Joe Biden can actually pull off another election run if he doesn't, if he makes a go for it, particularly against someone like Ron DeSantis, who's much younger, much more energetic, and much more cunning at navigating the current environment. So in a lot of ways, this midterm was really a discussion about what 2024 is going to look like for both parties. And I think you can make arguments for the Republicans actually having won tonight, particularly if they do manage to get to control of the House. You can make an argument for Ron DeSantis having won. You can make an argument for Joe Biden having won, doing much better than expected. But I think the one person who did probably lose tonight is Donald Trump, who's going to have now much more of an uphill battle to win control of the Republican Party in 2024.
Thanks for watching. Let's hand over to you, our audience. Do you think that Donald Trump will be able to run for a second term as US president? Leave your thoughts down in the comments section. Also, if you enjoyed this analysis, why don't you become a subscriber to the CRA's client services? There's a link in the description below where you can find out more. My name is David Ansara. Until next time, take care.